With financial capital, when we spend too much, we run up debt, which if left unchecked can eventually result in bankruptcy. With natural capital, when we draw down too much stock from our natural environment, we also run up a debt, which needs to be paid back. For example, by replanting clear-cut forests or allowing aquifers to replenish themselves after we have abstracted water. If we keep drawing down stocks of natural capital without allowing or encouraging nature to recover, we run the risk of local, regional, or even global ecosystem collapse. Poorly managed natural capital, therefore, becomes not only an ecological liability, but a social and economic liability too. Working against nature by overexploiting natural capital can be catastrophic, not just in terms of biodiversity loss, but also catastrophic for humans as ecosystem productivity and resilience decline over time and some regions become more prone to extreme events such as floods and droughts. Ultimately, this makes it more difficult for human communities to sustain themselves, particularly in already stressed ecosystems like Gandhi in Sokoto State, potentially leading to starvation, conflict over resource scarcity, and displacement of populations.
We don't have the consciousness that by doing that, in the long run, relate to protecting our lives. We don't relate environment to protection of life. Of course, the Sierra Leonean knows better now, okay? And Nigeria needs to learn from that so that we don't see the consequences before we start taking action.
Ultimately, nature is priceless. However, it is not valueless. And there have been many studies that have calculated natural capital's value in financial terms. For example, street trees in California provide over $1 billion per year in ecosystem services through atmospheric regulation and flood prevention. And Mexico's mangrove forests provide an annual $70 billion to the economy through storm protection, fisheries support, and ecotourism.
We need to make a business case for the protection of the environment. I'll give you another good example. Nobody has looked at this. You have manufacturing plant in Ibadan, for example, that manufacture drinks. They are not one, there are so many. How did they get the fresh water that comes to them? That must have been coming from a particular community, a forest, or somewhere. Okay? Now, if we are able to identify that, we can find that out through vital science. It's scientific. So if community A is providing 20 or 30% of the fresh water, because we take it for granted that when we dig borehole, there is fresh water. We are just taking it for granted. That fresh water is coming from somewhere, okay? And that is conservation. So if we get a community to say, okay, you need to protect the source of your fresh water, and if you just add like half a kobo on your drinks that goes to that community to preserve conservation, they will protect the environment with their life in exchange. Because the point is that if that water ceases, if the natural environment is kind of destroyed, they will find alternative way of getting water, and that will be costly.
The business case being put to the private sector is that it is in their interests to use their natural capital assets sustainably in the short term as a way to guarantee long-term profits. By depleting natural capital now, they put their supply chains and future productivity at risk. The ecosystem service value of tropical forests is estimated at $6,120 per hectare per year, while the cost of losing forests at the current pace amounts to $2.5 trillion per year if all ecosystem services were accounted for. Despite this clear macroeconomic case, the total yearly forest loss averages about 30 million hectares per year, representing the surface of one football field of forest being destroyed every 3 seconds. This continued loss and degradation of forests represents a massive market and policy failure.
There is a lack of understanding of the importance of our natural capital. And people fail to understand the interrelation and the interdependency of our natural capital, poverty, and development. And because the economics have failed to come up with a model and to place a price on our natural capital, the lack of appreciation has led to depletion of forests, degradation of our mangrove areas, and it's in many places it is only in now that the governments are waking up to the fact that you cannot, and let me emphasize, you cannot replace some of these natural capital when they have been exploited by mining companies or other extractives.
If managed well, natural capital is a long-term asset. It does not depreciate and can represent a cost-effective way of achieving multiple development goals, such as food and water security, climate change mitigation, and adaptation.
If you cannot put a number on the natural resources on which your economy depends, surely, how can you monitor it? If you cannot monitor it, how can you add value? If you cannot add value, how can you ensure, how can you link it to sustainability? Meaning, you are going to keep this stock for the benefit of the present generation to the future generations. If you don't have the number, that question cannot be answered. There is no way you can add value on something whose value you don't even know right from the beginning. Absolutely. There is no choice. We have to do something.
The recurring question is, why should this be critically important to all of us? The reality is that understanding overall stocks of natural capital and monitoring stock changes is vital at a national level. This understanding informs policy interventions and highlights whether countries are really creating new wealth and well-being or simply converting one form of capital, which is natural, into another.